Good morning. Hope everyone had a nice Memorial Day weekend. This week we will be going over how populations change because the genetic traits of a population change. Remember back to the unit on genetics when we talked about how phenotypes, that's how individuals look, are controlled by their genotype. That's the letter combination that is found on their DNA. So let's remember back that homozygous dominant, big A, heterozygous dominant, which is big A little a, or homozygous recessive, which is little a. Remember that the individual letter, either big A or little a, is called an allele. And it's going to be the alleles that we're going to be talking about, how those change. The number of times that we see them in a population is what controls how a population changes over time. All right, let's get started. It's important to remember that when we are talking about evolution, we are concerned with populations and not with individuals. So a gene pool is the genetic variation available in a population, and the frequency is the number of times that you see this variation in a population. So for example, hair color. Dark hair has a higher frequency than red hair. And the reason for this is because it's a dominant allele. And on top of that, we're seeing it more often. So that means that it has a higher frequency. You see red hair less frequently or less often. Okay, natural selection can change the frequency of phenotypes. We have three distinct patterns. One is called stabilizing, one is called directional, and one is called disruptive. These are all different types of natural selection, and they are based on which phenotypes are selected for and which ones are selected against. Stabilizing selection happens when the average individual phenotype is selected for. And if you can see that the solid line is the population after natural selection has occurred. So stabilizing can see that the line is very narrow and the middle is very high. So we call that stabilizing selection. Directional selection happens when one phenotype is favored over another. And again, if we're looking at the solid line, that is our population after natural selection happens. In this case, you can see that birds with a larger beak are favored over ones with smaller beaks. So over time, your population of birds are going to have bigger beaks. Disruptive selection happens when you have two phenotypes, two extreme phenotypes that are selected for, and not the average individuals is selected against. Again, we're going to be looking at the solid line. This is the one with the population selected after natural selection occurs. So over time, what will end up happening is you have two subgroups within the same population. You'll have a distinct population of birds with small beaks, and you'll have a distinct population of birds with large beaks. Oh, one of the most infamous studies of Darwin's finches is with this couple, Peter and Rosemary Grant. I have linked a short video interview with them so you can hear about their study and how they have been able to witness over many times evolution occurring with Darwin's finches in the Galapagos. So this short video, actually goes over how this has happened and what they have found. All right, so we're going to look at evolution, the fact that this can take a long time, but it can also happen very quickly. The populations change due to changes in the gene pool. That is the allele frequency that you see over time. There are three ways that this can happen. You can have mutations, something called genetic drift, and something called gene flow. Mutations typically are either they're either helpful or they're not helpful. A lot of times when a mutation is useful, you don't actually see it until more generations have happened, when you have changes in environmental impacts. The other um, thing that can happen too, gene flow, is where you have individuals that move into and out of a population. And then because that happens over time, this type of changes in a gene pool can happen very slowly. The one that happens that causes populations to change in a very short period of time is genetic drift. In genetic drift, we have two different examples of this. We have something called a bottleneck effect, and we have something called founder effects. And genetic drift is also caused by random chance. So this is something that happens with an event like a disease or drought, hurricane, volcanic eruption, something that happens by chance and that can change a population super quickly. So the first example that we have is bottleneck. This is caused by an event that decreases a population very quickly. We have two examples for a bottleneck effect. We have the cheetah and black-footed ferret. If you look at the diagram that I have provided, it's an actual bottle. The reason why it is shown this way is when you are looking at a bottleneck, it actually, the diameter decreases and only allows some things to get out. So in this case, you don't have all of the genetic variations that make it into the new population. So our cheetahs, the reason why they went through a bottleneck effect is because they had a disease and a natural disaster about 10,000 years ago that caused their population to reduce. Only 7 cheetahs actually survived. So they have a super low genetic variation. This happened. So the current cheetah population that we have on the planet are all descendants from this. And ironically, the individuals that survived, you only had 6 female survivors and 1 male survivor. So pretty much all of the cheetahs, they're all interrelated. For the black-footed ferret, this unfortunately was caused by us. They had habitat loss due to ranching. So all of the places that they lived, they were pushed out because of what we were doing and the fact that we are growing cows. And so as a result, their population drastically reduced. And although their numbers are improving because of the fact that we are making sure that they still have very low genetic variation. So the problem with populations with very low genetic variation is the fact that the more times that they have a random effect that happens on them, the less likely they're actually going to survive. So one of the concerns that scientists have about the cheetah population and the black-footed ferret population is the fact they are eventually going to go extinct. The last example of genetic drift is called the founder effect. And this is where you have a small number of individuals from a main population that basically leave and to create a new community in a different location. They find a new area to inhabit. So this can be any organism that can do this. This is what happened to Darwin's finches initially. You had a few individuals that blew off course and landed on the island and then ended up becoming a new species or multiple new species. This also happened with people. So the Dutch Amish founded a new population in Pennsylvania. This was due to religious oppression that was happening to them in Europe, and when they founded their new population, the individuals that came over, they had a higher rate of dwarfism, and because the Amish basically are a tight-knit group that they kind of stay together, they have a higher frequency of dwarfism in comparison to the rest of human population.